Good morning. Thank you for coming. I'm David Kapp, United States Attorney, Northern District of Indiana. Let me introduce our law enforcement team on both sides of the border. To my far right, Bob Ramsey of the Maryville Office of the FBI, Chuck Perusnik, the director of our Lake County HIDA, Guy Baker, our DEA supervisor in Maryville, Chief Dowdy from the Hammond Police Department, Captain John Sotelo from the Whiting Police Department, Jay Abbott, the special agent in charge of the Indiana FBI, Mark Becker, the chief of East Chicago. To my far left, Tom Papadakis, the deputy chief of Gary, Andrew Creighton, Department of Justice lawyer, David Nozick, an assistant United States attorney in our office, Ray Roundtree, the ASAC of the ATF in Chicago, Commander Chris Kennedy of the Chicago Police Department. And I am particularly honored to have also here today my good friend and colleague, Zach Farden, United States Attorney, Chicago, my good friend and colleague, Jim Trusty, the chief of the Organized Crime Division in the United States Department of Justice, and my longtime friend and colleague, Bernie Carter, our Lake County prosecutor here in Indiana. We are announcing today a racketeering indictment against 8 individuals who are members or associates of the 2-6 Nation street gang. The 2-6 Nation originated in Chicago along 26th Street, thus the name. A local affiliate was formed on this side of the border, and its criminal operations were centered here in East Chicago. This indictment that we unsealed this morning alleges that the 2-6 Nation is a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in murder, attempted murder, robbery, aggravated battery, aggravated assault, kidnapping, and narcotics trafficking. Named in the racketeering conspiracy are Adrian Tansil, age 37 of East Chicago, Jesus Fuentes, age 39 of East Chicago, Frank Perez, age 33, last out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Anthony Aguilera, age 36, currently in Hammond resident. Also identified in the racketeering conspiracy are Kenante Pennington, who has been in federal custody already on earlier related charges out of this office, and Louis Henderson, Ricardo Pena, and Julio Cartagena, all of whom are now deceased. Tansil, Fuentes, Perez, and Aguilera are also named in a narcotics trafficking conspiracy, along with 4 of their associates, Esther Carrera, Paul Brock, Oscar Cosme, and Alma Carrera. The narcotics conspiracy alleges distribution of more than 1,000 kilograms of marijuana, 5 kilograms of coke, and 280 grams of crack cocaine. You will all be receiving copies of the indictment. The racketeering conspiracy, as you will see, details over 40 overt acts. And what I think you will quickly discern from the indictment is the back and forth across the border. These criminals have, of course, no respect for the state line border, nor do they have any respect for any border of any particular jurisdiction. And this indictment is the result of this federal, local law enforcement effort on both sides of the border. In the indictment, alleged as some of the overt acts is the murder of Jose Pena, which occurred in Whiting, the murder of Julio Cartagena, which occurred in East Chicago, the armed kidnapping of Cartagena's wife and children, which occurred in Hammond, Indiana. Another overt act alleged in the indictment, which I think indicates the sophistication and extent to which this criminal operation or this criminal organization operated, is that at one point they installed a tracking device on Cartagena's automobile, and they tracked that device from a computer in Mexico. This morning, law enforcement made arrests of Anthony Aguilera in Hammond. Brock and Carrera were arrested last night. The others are already in federal or state custody on either companion charges or unrelated charges. As I said, this was a cooperative effort by our team, and I want to particularly thank two people. First of all, Jim Trusty is here from the Department of Justice, and this is our second or third cooperative effort with Jim and his people. And I'd like to thank Andrew Creighton, who's an attorney with Jim, who's been assigned to our office and is working with us on this. Particular thanks to Assistant United States Attorney David Nozick on our staff. Quite frankly, David is the one that has done the vast majority of the work on this and a number of our other indictments. So David, thank you. As some of you know who have followed what we've been doing in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Hammond, this is our third use of the federal RICO statute over the past few years against a violent street gang in Northwest Indiana. We are going to continue to use this powerful tool to get these individuals off the street. And once again, I want to send my message to those who are members of or who continue to associate with violent street gangs. We are coming after you, and you are next. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Zach Farden. Zach?
Thank you, Dave. Good morning. And just to pick up on Dave's sentiment, criminals don't respect borders, and so neither can we. Our two prosecutors' offices, along with our colleagues at the Justice Department, are completely in sync. We are working together to stop the flow of drugs and guns from Indiana to Chicago and back. And this case, this indictment, is a result of those efforts. You know, when violent street gangs like the 2-6 move drugs and guns and violence from Chicago to East Chicago to Bolingbrook and back, we will follow. My office, Dave's office, DEA, ATF, FBI, the Chicago Police Department, the East Chicago Police Department, we will follow. And the violent street gangs are on notice. I want to thank Dave. I want to thank all of his team, local, state, and federal, of investigators and of prosecutors that have worked so hard to bring these charges and to make this day possible. I am here on behalf of my office in Chicago to continue to lend our support and to our ongoing commitment in this partnership, in this cooperation, for as long as it takes until we stop these violent street gangs that plague both of our districts. So it's an honor to be here today, and I want to thank Dave. I want to thank Jim Trusty and his colleague Andrew for their work on this case and for coming in from Washington, D.C. to be here today. And I want to thank all of our law enforcement partners that stand before you from all of those different agencies, local, state, and federal, that I just mentioned. It's an honor to be here, to be part of this, and we're going to continue in the fight.
Thank you, Zach. Jim.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Zach. Good morning. Today's unsealing and takedown of the second superseding indictment in this case is a great testament to the value of hard work and experience on behalf of federal prosecutors and their investigative partners represented here with me. This continued expansion of this case reflects a sustained effort to bring 2-6 Nation leaders and members and associates to justice for their years of mayhem, violence, and drug dealing in East Chicago, Gary, Chicago, and even as far as Texas and Mexico. The indictment alleges that the 2-6 Nation orchestrated and carried out a series of brutal crimes, including murders, kidnapping, drug trafficking, robberies, and other offenses spanning more than 2 decades. The gang brandished weapons like sawed-off shotguns and AK-47 assault rifles to try to establish control at the expense of other gangs. And while they killed men they believed to be rival gang members or 2-6 members who had fallen out of favor, they also inflicted harm on innocent women and children by way of such activities as armed kidnappings. Additionally, law enforcement officers and agents were at risk as well. For example, the indictment describes a 2011 barricade situation in Pennsylvania where a defendant shot at FBI agents trying to arrest him for murder. And the indictment also alleges another defendant pointed an assault rifle at Gary police officers in 1999. As this case also illustrates, gang violence is often very challenging to investigate and prosecute. It may take months or even years for dedicated prosecutors and investigators to uncover the connections and to develop evidence to support inclusion of cold case crimes such as murders. This week's indictment, with its listing or charging of numerous violent acts and murders, including crimes dating back 22 years, proves once again that the Department of Justice, working with state and federal investigators, will aggressively pursue these cases and bring violent gang members to justice. Over the years, the Northern District of Indiana U.S. Attorney's Office and the Organized Crime and Gang Section of the Department of Justice have partnered up to use RICO and other federal charges to disrupt and dismantle gangs like the Imperial Gangsters, the Latin Kings, and now the 2-6 Nation. These ongoing or rolling prosecutions of violent gangs in this region are a model of cooperation between law enforcement agencies and prosecutors, and they once again demonstrate that the task force approach toward fighting gangs brings the best chance of success. I want to thank our partners represented here at the podium for their hard work and the continued success against some of the nation's worst criminal enterprises. And I have no doubt that the prosecutors that you've heard of today and the supporting agencies have made a serious difference in the lives and the communities in Indiana, Illinois, and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Berman?
Yes. Thank you, Dave. I kind of want to speak from a personal perspective in reference to being a resident, a former resident of East Chicago. I lived here all my life. I was born here. I raised my family here. My kids went to school here. And my mother, 96 years of age, lives about 5 blocks from here. I'm here in this community all the time. And all I can say is I appreciate all the individuals up before you, and not only ones before you, but in the background here. And not only that, I talked to Dave Urbanski in my office. He did a lot of work assisting in these cases. And I said, Dave, you want to go to a press conference with me? No, Bernie, I'm staying here in the office and do my work. So there's so many law enforcement officers who are not here today who have participated and helped in trying to make our community better. We have an obligation, and we understand that as law enforcement officers, we have an obligation to make your community better, make it safe for our children can walk down the streets, they can frequent any type of park or any type of programs that goes on in our community without any violence and without any drug exposure or human life exposure being taken. And we're going to continue to do that. I'm going to certainly, my office is going to continue to work with everyone up here as well as a lot of state agencies to ensure that we do whatever we can to make our community safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. Chief Becker? Sure.
This is a great day for East Chicago. It's a great day for Lake County. It's a great day for the region. In 2011, the FBI's uniform crime reports reflected that East Chicago was perhaps the most dangerous city in Northwest Indiana. And in 2 short years, our number of crimes that we've reported to the FBI are the lowest that they've been since 1995, some 18 or 20 years ago. We have a very good police department with very good officers. Officer Brian Payne has been assigned to the ATF task force. I know he spent many hours away from his family, and I thank you for that, working diligently on this. But our public safety efforts are tenfold when we all come together as we have today. And I thank each and every member here for not only making East Chicago a safer place, but for making the region much, much safer. Whether it's through our Region Stop team or whatever we do together, as I've always said, none of us can accomplish more than all of us can together. And I think this is just a prime example of that. I think that this is the best way to remove these monsters from our streets, to return these streets back to the community, to the good people who we want in our parks, who we want on our streets, who we want living and working in our city. And certainly East Chicago remains pledged to that cooperation. We're going to continue very aggressively to work with our partners to deal with these types of matters. And so I just thank everyone. I know this is not the end of the story. It's just a continuation of an ongoing investigation, and I'm sure we'll be gathering in the near future to announce future indictments. And again, I thank everyone.
Jay.
The FBI, in collaboration with the United States Attorney's Office and with our law enforcement partners, will vigorously investigate violent crime investigations like this together. For the FBI, we're going to utilize every appropriate and authorized investigative technique to most efficiently and effectively impact violent crime investigations. The most important thing for me is for the public that we serve to know that together, the United States Attorney's Office, the FBI, and our law enforcement partners will do everything that we possibly can to make the communities that we all live in more secure and safe places to live. I'm extremely proud to be part of this partnership and this team approach that you see before you here today. Thanks, David.
Commander Kennedy, I'd like to have Chicago PD say a few words.
Just spinning along that common thread, obviously it is teamwork. It's being involved and realizing that making your neighbors safe makes you that much safer. It's a sharing of intelligence. So obviously for us, it's we've brought something back home benefiting from this prosecution as well. And hopefully we've given information that's benefited it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Anybody else? We will take a few questions.
So,
Teresa.
I know this has already expanded quite a bit. You know, there were, I think, just 2 or 3 people originally charged in this case.
Right.
And that was for a homicide that took place, like, what, more than 10 years ago?
Correct.
How far back does this indictment now span?
The indictment now goes back some 22 years, I believe. I think the first overt act, Teresa, is in, I forget when, 92 or, yeah, 92. Yep. So that's one of the powers of the RICO statute, is we can reach back. And as I said, this is our 3rd use of that statute, and we're going to continue to use it against these violent organizations.
The indictment of these 8, what does that represent for this gang? Have you crippled the gang? Or obviously there's a lot more.
Well, I'm always reluctant to predict. I can tell you that we've got the key people in this gang, at least those key people that were directing and organizing some of the more horrific acts of violence. They are in custody, and they won't be going anywhere. Teresa?
Is it all members of, like, the 2 Sixers in Northwest Indiana, or does it extend to any of the members in Chicago?
These guys went back and forth. Most of them were based over here, but there's, you know, it's just, as I said, you'll see in the indictment, it's just constant back and forth. And that's what we're dealing with. And that's why it's so important to have Zach here and Jim here, Chicago PD here, because we are working as a team.
How important is the Chicago PD intelligence regarding gangs?
It's extremely important. My hat is off to CPD's intelligence. I have a staff member who is regularly at CPD in their intel unit. I can't say enough about how important that intelligence is.
How many members of the 2 Six Nation are there?
You know, I wouldn't estimate that.
Are they
Sorry.
the biggest ones here? I mean, what, are they like the third largest?
I wouldn't even want to characterize it. They are a violent street gang, and we have today taken 8 of their members or associates off the street. Yes, sir.
Was this related directly to the Imperial Gangsters investigation, or was it completely separate investigation?
Well, this team is looking at violent street gangs. So in that sense, they're all related, but this particular investigation was against this particular street gang.
In particular, what I've heard so far speaks to narcotics. Can you speak briefly, if possible, to the gun trade that these gangs were engaged in?
You know, I'm not going to comment on that. There's a number of references in the indictment that you'll see about possession or use of particular weapons, but the thrust of this indictment is the alleged murders, armed robberies, kidnappings, and narcotics trafficking. Jim.
In the past, the gangsters and so forth, if I remember correctly, there was a lot of Illinois involvement also in that. And the other one, I think, was the Disciples. Now you've got 2 6s starting on the south side, and then they bring it down here to East Chicago. Is that some sort of trend that these gangs see Indiana as a place to expand? Or what's going on there?
You know, I don't know if I would say it's a trend, Jim. It's just the reality. You know, again, the border's meaningless, and it's just back and forth regardless of what violent street gang you're talking about.
If I could just follow that up with Attorney Fardin, are you seeing it the other way? You getting Indiana people going to Illinois?
Of course. I mean, I think when you look at this indictment, you'll see what Dave is talking about. There is these defendants are not sitting around having conversations about let's commit this crime in Indiana and that crime in Chicago. They're bouncing back and forth thoughtlessly across the border for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to facilitate their drug trade and the related violent activity that they thrive on. And so they know no borders, and as I said at the outset, nor can we, and that's why it's so important that we are working together the way we are. It's important today, and it's going to be important for years to come.
Jesus Fuentes, he was already charged in this, right?
There's some companion charges against
okay.
Jesus Fuentes, and I can't comment anymore.
But I guess, because I know like there's some murders alleged in this, and I know generally when you have murder in aid of racketeering, it generally comes with, you know, possible death penalty. Has it been decided for him, and are other states?
Yeah, the murder allegations do trigger death penalty eligible, but please, there's been no decision. That decision is solely the decision of the Attorney General of the United States.
Do you believe that using RICO is better than letting local authorities go after these guys?
No, I think it's just part of the overall effort that we have to bring to bear on these guys. That's why it's important to have people like Bernie Carter here, because in fact, one of Bernie's attorneys works in my office. That's how close our offices coordinate. So we, as law enforcement officers, need to assess and allocate resources across the board. And there are times when it's a lot more effective and a lot quicker for the state to run with something. Then there's times when we can step back, do a more in-depth federal investigation, and bring to bear, for instance, the RICO statute.
Can you give us a sense of the manpower that goes into an effort like this?
Well, you're seeing part of it before you, and as Chief Becker and some of the others alluded to, the real work's being done by men and women out on the streets, police officers, agents from these federal agencies. So there's a lot. And you know, putting together these RICO indictments is a very time-consuming, small piece at a time. And sometimes it's not even a piece. Sometimes it's maybe a half of a piece or a quarter of a piece. And some of those small little pieces may come from something as seemingly innocuous as a Chicago police traffic stop or an East Chicago police traffic stop, things like that. So there's a lot of law enforcement involved in the background to result in an indictment like today. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
This is LaTanya reporting for ECTV, and I'm here inside of the East Chicago Police Department, where a press conference was just held on some indictments that included members of the 2 6 Gang. Chief, can you tell us how this indictment involves and how it will affect the East Chicago community?
Well, this has been an ongoing matter for several years. As a matter of fact, some of the overt acts that the indictment mentions occurred back in my days with the FBI. I remember Jesus Fuentes back in 1999 pulling out an assault rifle on the Gary Police Department. I was there for that. I mean, it goes that far back. And we've taken a lot of monsters off the street with this indictment, as we did with the IG indictment, as they did with the Latin King indictment. The partnerships that we have with all these agencies that were here today, the many federal agencies, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Bernie Carter's office, other state and local agencies, they all come in as a team, and it just not only affects East Chicago, it affects Lake County, it affects the region, it affects Porter County, it affects the city of Chicago. This is really an important day for us, and we're going to continue our partnerships with these agencies. We have many strategic partnerships with many different federal agencies, to include IUN with crime mapping. We're reaching out. We know we can do more as a team than any of us can do independently by ourselves, and it's a great day for the city, and the people should feel happy that our crime rate continues to go down. We continue that downward trend of our violent and property crimes, and that's going to glitch up once in a while. We understand that, but as long as overall the crimes are going down, that's our goal, and that's where we're headed.
So do you think that these partnerships will eventually have a major impact on East Chicago?
Well, that's certainly our goal. I think they already have had a major impact on the city. You know, when you look at 2011 and the crimes reported to the FBI were some of the highest, and in fact the city was labeled as perhaps the most dangerous in Northwest Indiana. And in 2 short years, in 2013, the number of crimes that we've reported were the lowest ever in the history that I can find, going back to the records on file here at the police department. So in 2 years, we've already brought our crime rate down. The property and violent crimes combined from January through June of this year compared to January through June of last year, 18% reduction again. So it really speaks volumes to not only everyone here, but certainly you've got to give a shout out to the men and women of this police department. I mean, 10,600 traffic stops last year. They're making their presence known on the street. They're making the gang members know that we're out there, and they're sending a message that we're committed to public safety in East Chicago.
Do you have any units that are geared straight toward like gangs that are actually being very effective?
Well, we have we took our gang and narcotics unit and devoted that to the region stop team. So we have 4 or 5 members of our department working the region stop team, which does include gang investigations when needed. We have an officer assigned to the DEA task force, and we have an officer assigned to the ATF task force. Those officers were instrumental in what happened here, and we're very grateful because it took a lot of hours away from their families that they spent day and night working these cases. When they slept, when the gangbangers slept, they had to go up and follow them around when they were moving around. There was no schedule to it. This isn't a Monday through Friday job, and they gave up a lot, and I'm very grateful to the officers of this department, not only the ones we have assigned to the task force, but also the detectives and the patrol officers and our support people here, and certainly our dispatchers, because they got to put up with all our traffic on the radio. But it's a combined effort, and we've been very, very successful so far.
Well, Chief, we just want to thank you. You're doing an excellent job here in the city of East Chicago, and we appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you.